Hi everyone, welcome back to Lost Spirits. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's story. Imagine a house at the edge of a town, its windows dark, its walls older than anyone remembers. What if it wasn't empty? Our first story begins there, in a place where the air feels heavy like it's holding its breath. This is the house that listens, and it starts with a question. Have you ever felt a room change when you stepped inside? In a sleepy village, people avoided the old gray house, saying it watched them as they passed. No one lived there, not for years, but the curtains twitched sometimes just a little when the moon was high. They said it wasn't haunted, not exactly, more like it was waiting, patient and still, for someone to stay. A boy named Eli, curious and restless, decided to find out why. One night, he crept up the creaky steps, the wind brushing his hair like a sigh. The door was unlocked, swinging open with a groan, and inside the air felt thick, like it clung to him. He whispered, "Hello?" Not expecting an answer, but the walls seemed to lean closer, soaking up his voice. He found a chair in the parlor, dusty and worn, and sat down, his heart tapping a slow rhythm. The house stayed quiet, but he felt it shift, like it was settling around him, getting comfortable. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. He couldn't tell. And then he heard it, a faint hum, low and steady, coming from everywhere and nowhere. It wasn't loud, just enough to make his eyelids heavy, his thoughts soft. He woke at dawn outside, lying in the grass, the house looming behind him, silent again. The village said he'd dreamed it, but Eli knew. He'd felt it listen, and it hadn't let go. They found his shoes later, neat by the door, though he swore he'd worn them home. After that, he slept deeper, longer, always with that hum in his ears, pulling him back. The house didn't call him again, not out loud, but sometimes he'd catch its shadow stretching toward him, gentle and sure. People stopped talking about it, letting the story fade, but the curtain still moved now and then, waiting for someone new. Picture it as you breathe slow. Those walls, that hum, that quiet pull. What would you say if it heard you? The tale ends here, soft as a whisper, slipping into the next. Our second story takes us to a lake where the water never ripples. What if it hid something below? In the stillness beneath, fishermen avoided the north end, saying their lines came up empty, their boats drifting without wind. A girl named Mara rowed out one evening, her oars barely splashing, the silence pressing in. She leaned over, peering down, and saw her face staring back, too pale, too still. The air grew cold, and she felt a tug, not on the boat, but inside her chest, like something wanted her closer. She rowed back, heart steady but slow, and slept that night with the window shut. The lake stayed flat, its secret sinking deeper, calling her in dreams she couldn't shake. Next, we wander to the Lantern Man, a myth of a figure in the fields. What if his light wasn't kind? Farmers saw him at dusk, a glow bobbing through the wheat, too far to reach. A child followed once, barefoot and quiet, and came back saying, "He's waiting." The light flickered every night after, closer each time, until it stopped. The child slept sounder then, smiling, and no one asked why. The fields are dark now, but some nights a faint gleam lingers, patient and soft. The third tale creeps into a town with a clock tower that never struck. What if it counted something else? In the silent hours, folks said it watched them, its hands stuck at midnight. A baker lingered once, staring up, and felt his breath slow, his limbs heavy. He heard a tick, just one, and woke in his bed, flour still on his hands. The tower stayed quiet, but he felt it counting, marking time no one else could see. People pass it now, heads down, lulled by its stillness, wondering what it waits for. Our fourth story drifts to the Wire Whisperers, a conspiracy tied to old telegraph poles. What if they spoke when no one sent a message? A lineman heard it first, a hum through the wires, words he couldn't catch. He climbed up, ear pressed close, and felt them pull, soft, steady, like a heartbeat. Night after night, he listened, his sleep growing deeper, his eyes distant. One morning, he was gone, the wires silent, but some swear they hum still, sharing secrets to those who lean in. Last in this part, we step into the fog's keeper, where mist hid more than the hills. What if it remembered you? A shepherd lost his flock one gray dawn, the fog swallowing them whole. He called out, voice muffled, and heard their bells, faint, then close, then gone. Days later, he found them grazing, but their wool was gray, their eyes too calm. He slept by the fire after, dreaming of mist that whispered his name, and woke to find his staff carved with lines he didn't make. The fog rolls in still, quiet and thick, waiting for someone to answer. That's 5 tales to carry you through the shadows, each one a thread in the night's weave. Let them settle over you, slow and easy, as we pause here. More await when you're ready. Rest now. Let your mind drift, and feel the quiet pull you down. A train rolled through the hills, its tracks long forgotten by maps. What if it carried more than passengers? In a valley where the mist hung low, people heard its whistle, soft and far, even when no train was due. A woman named Lila waited one night, her coat damp, her breath slow, watching the rails gleam under the moon. The train came, lights dim, doors open, and she stepped inside, the air warm and still. The seats were empty, but she felt them, eyes she couldn't see, watching her sit. The whistle blew again, a sigh that sank into her bones, and the windows showed nothing but gray. She leaned back, her eyelids drooping, and heard a voice, faint and kind, say, "Stay." Morning came, and the station was quiet, her scarf left on the platform, the train gone. Some say it runs still, picking up those who wait too long, its rumble a lullaby in the fog. In a village by the cliffs, a bell hung in the church, untouched for years. What if it rang for no one alive? The townsfolk swore it stayed silent, but old Sarah heard it one stormy night, a single toll that vibrated through her chest. She walked to the church, her cane tapping the stone, and found the rope still, the bell swaying just a little. The sound came again, deep and slow, and she felt her hands tremble, her breath catch. She sat in a pew, the echo wrapping around her, and slept there till dawn, dreaming of faces she'd forgotten. The bell never rang for others, but Sarah felt it watching, counting something she couldn't name. Now, when the wind blows, a faint hum drifts down, gentle and waiting. A radio sat in a pawn shop, its dial stuck. What if it played more than static? A man named Jack bought it cheap, plugging it in one rainy night, expecting nothing but noise. Instead, a voice came through, low and calm, saying things he'd never told anyone, secrets from years ago. He turned it off, but the words lingered, his sleep heavy with their weight. Each night, he tried again, the voice clearer, promising rest if he'd listened longer. One morning, the shop was empty, the radio gone, but neighbors heard a hum from his room, steady and soft. They say it's out there still, finding someone new. Its signal a whisper in the dark. Out in the woods, a tree stood alone, its bark carved with names. What if it kept them forever? A hunter stumbled on it, his knife dull, his fire low, and traced the letters with a finger. They weren't his, but they felt familiar, like memories he'd lost. He camped there, the night quiet, and heard a rustle, not wind, but something breathing through the leaves. His sleep was deep, his dreams full of faces calling out, and he woke with his name scratched below the rest. He left, but the tree stayed in his mind, its roots reaching for him. Others see it now, the list longer, the air around it thick and still. By a river, a mill wheel turned slow. What if it ground more than grain? The miller's son watched it spin, the water dark, the creak of wood filling the night. He swore he saw shadows in the current, hands reaching up, too faint to be sure. One evening, he touched the wheel, his palm cold, and felt it pull, not hard but steady, like it knew him. His father found him asleep by the bank, muttering about voices in the water, soft and sad. The wheel keeps turning, the river smooth, its secret sinking deeper with every turn. A bridge stretched over a dry riverbed, its stones cracked and old. What if it led somewhere else? In a town where dust coated everything, people crossed it daily, their steps heavy, their eyes down. A girl named Rose lingered one evening, her shadow long, the air still as glass. She felt a pull, gentle and cold, tugging her to the other side, where the path faded into haze. Halfway across, she heard it, a murmur from below, like water flowing where none should be. The sound wrapped around her soft and deep, and her feet moved slower, her breath easing out. She reached the end, but turned back, the town dim behind her, the murmur louder now. Next day, her coat hung on the rail, empty, and the bridge stood quiet, waiting for another to listen. In a field, a scarecrow leaned crooked, its straw damp. What if it moved when no one watched? Farmers passed it every dawn, their carts creaking, never looking twice. A boy named Sam stayed late one night, his lantern low, curious about the rustle he'd heard. The scarecrow stayed still, but the air thickened, and he felt eyes on his back, patient and calm. He stepped closer, straw brushing his hand, and heard a sigh, not wind, but something older. His sleep that night was heavy, full of dreams where the scarecrow turned its head, slow and sure. Morning came, and it stood as before, but Sam felt it shift in his mind, a shadow stretching toward him. A phone rang in an empty house, its cord cut. What if it's still connected? A woman named Claire moved in, the place cheap and quiet, the phone dusty on the wall. Late one night, it rang sharp and low, and she froze, her heart tapping slow. She lifted it, hearing nothing at first, then a whisper, her name, soft and far. The line stayed dead after, but the sound lingered, curling into her sleep, pulling her deeper. Each night it rang again, the voice closer, promising rest if she answered longer. She left one day, the phone silent, but neighbors hear it now, a faint echo in the walls. Up in the hills, a cave yawned wide, its mouth dark. What if it breathed? A shepherd named Tom led his flock past it, the wind odd, warm one minute, cold the next. He peeked inside one dusk, his torch flickering, and felt air push back, steady and alive. Shadows danced on the walls, too many for one light, and he heard a hum, low and smooth, filling his chest. He stumbled out, the night thick, and slept by his sheep, dreaming of tunnels that went nowhere. The cave stays open, its breath slow, calling those who stand too close. Near a coast, a buoy floated alone, its bell dull. What if it warned of nothing real? Fishermen ignored it, their boats gliding past, the sea flat and gray. A girl named Tess swam out one morning, her strokes lazy, the water cool. She reached it, fingers on the rusted metal, and heard a clang, soft, then deep, vibrating through her. The sound stayed with her, sinking into her bones, and she swam back, slower, her eyes half closed. That night she slept hard, the clang in her dreams, pulling her under. The buoy drifts still, its toll a sigh over the waves.